This is the No Stroke Podcast with your co-hosts David Dansereau and Michael Garrow, helping you to support and thrive in life after stroke. Their podcast is designed for educational and community support purposes only and should not replace medical treatment and guidance of your own health professional team.
Welcome to episode 2 of season 3 of the No Stroke Podcast. My name's Dave Dansereau. I'm here with my big brain guest today, for those on the viewing on the video cast, Michael Garrow. Mike, describe your backdrop for us here, please.
Well, I feel pretty radiant at the moment. So did a little surprise for David, again, for the folks who aren't watching us on YouTube, which I do recommend. I changed my background, a good old early 2020 Zoom trick to change the background there, but I'm using our no stroke podcast logo with the gigantic brain behind me. So I think it suits. It might stick for season 3. We'll see how it moves over the course of the next few seasons we have coming up. But for the moment, it's like I drank my brain juice today. Yeah.
I'm liking it. It's like a surprise around every corner. I haven't taken the swag off since you sent this gift over. So for those listening, I have our No Strokes, podcast sweatshirt on, but we're really bringing the colors into this episode. So we have a great guest coming on, and before that, I just want to, early in the year here, just a quick touch base for our guests. How are you doing with your health and fitness and personal goals as we go into week 2?
Put me on the spot, David.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, you know what? It's been a rechange of priorities here. You know what? And that's a nice thing with goal setting. You could always change your goals, but as long as you keep that focus, right? So for me, I moved into A, B, and C is how I'm classifying my goals for the year. And I have hopefully a lot of years left in me, so we could get through the alphabet eventually. But we're going to start here. So A, my goal is to increase my fitness, but also utilize that Apple Watch that you've been praising. So get myself on an Apple Watch, which I actually get through my employer, which is quite handy.
Oh, perfect.
So gonna get set up on that. We're finding a boxing studio when I get down. So I'm making a move into Meg's, where Meg and I are getting a place together in Queens. So once I get that settled, I've already chatted with a good friend who ran a boxing club down that way. Perfect. So he's given me a few recommendations. But I have gotten out around here. I got a nice new yoga mat for Christmas. So utilize that a couple times, just trying to get the habit in, right? I'm not going to force it every day at this point, but I'm progressing there. And then C is for coding. So I know we talked about curls and coding, that's my second, or that's my third. So I think it's something that, will really help me professionally and, help us bring this No Stroke podcast logo across the interweb. That's the goal.
Perfect. And I can see the coding you've done. Your brain has already expanded there. So you're really going big. And I'm proud of you. The Apple Watch, you're not going to regret. I hope to bring a module to enable us platform. As you know, I've got 4 out of 5 family members all now connected to the Apple Watch. In fact, just got a notice that my daughter just finished her circuit, and I just sent her a little nudge. And it's just, we have, when you're ready to go, and that's a great perk. Take advantage of that through your work. If they're gonna offer that perk, take advantage. You won't regret it. So
the accountability factor, right? And it helps, really does drive it.
And the analytics and the things behind it kind of goes to what when we bring our guest on, we talked a little, and we talked about, I shared with you, I kind of bought myself along the ideas, personal empowerment and having that data to kind of nudge and generate more insights into how you're doing or not doing, right? I bought myself a gift for the new year, and I think I shared with you, but it's the cardio mobile EKG. I had it in my shopping cart for a while, and I saw it drop right before the holidays. So I made that purchase. And, as I've, been pretty public about the fact that I have a device in my ticker, right? Something that corrected what caused my stroke. But for me, during the pandemic, it's hard to get follow-up visits with your cardiologist. And I just wanted to kind of take a little bit more control of gaining some insights about how my body's doing. So in addition to the watch, kind of, in the past, I've mentioned too that I, flashing up this for for the video cast, but I also kind of monitor my blood pressure. And again, anyone listening who's has a stroke, it's, certainly something to have an awareness of, especially if you were hypertensive or had blood pressure. So when we get into the episode today, I think it will I think this kind of ties in to our guest, but I did want to maybe just transition quickly to in the news, Mike, and announcing the fact that there's a Rehab Tech Summit coming up in March that I'm, pleased for both of us to announce that we're going to be involved in the Rehab Tech Summit this year. They're going to be doing a neuro edition in March, and we're going to have one of the coordinators of the event come on and talk about the conference, because this year I attended last year as a participant, and it was all about how to bring technology into rehabilitation. So, I think that we'll save the bulk of that for when we bring our guest on and we can give more details. But did you want to add anything regarding that component of the technology conference?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. I know a few folks, in our network attended last year. Obviously, we're close with the co-founder, with Lauren, who is, putting on the event this year. But it's a great event for really the therapists out there who might be listening, who are trying to make this transition into the digital health space, or at least understand, where this space is moving. And then for, our listeners who might be either caregivers or survivors, again, it's a nice event to follow. They will get into the weeds of the technology, and it might be a bit dense, but I think, from a patient perspective, it's important to understand the tools and resources that are out there, right? Because, how often do we talk about just that missing chunk, that missing phase in the rehab process of, once you leave that acute phase, once you leave your PT studio, your OTs, it's that next chunk where you're trying to maintain and get past, those peaks and valleys that, there's some really interesting technology companies coming out that, are trying to fill that void. So I think it'll be a nice event. We're obviously very fortunate to be involved in it this year. As David mentioned, we're going to have Lauren on to really speak to it in depth, to chat. We had one of the speakers on actually as a guest of ours who was a speaker last year, Kate, so, we were able to, really understand from her point of view, as an occupational therapist, how she made this transition into accessibility and gaming, trying to, build devices and build programs that work for folks who, might have some impairments. So
yeah, and I'll just and I'll just add to that too, Mike. Also, I met Benga Adiko, who we had on from the Newgate. He was also a speaker at last year's conference. So it was a very busy event, and the second and third parts of the event is going to have the main forum with a lot of their keynotes, but they're also going to have the age tech component. They're going to space it out this year. Of course, it is virtual, but they're going to space it out beginning of March, then mid-March for the second main event, and then the age tech summit part of it's going to be extended out into April. So lot to cover when we have Lauren on, but let's jump into, would you like to interview would you like to give a little intro to our guests for this week?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're joined by Sandra Saldana, who is the CEO and co-founder of Alva Health. So Alva Health is a startup based in New Haven, Connecticut. And they spun out of Yale University. So Sandra and I, again, kind of going back to my Health Excel days, we were putting on an event down in Pittsburgh with who is one of the farmers down in Pittsburgh. Anyway, I can't remember off the top of my head. But we were looking for, some innovative East Coast companies, really in the device space, particularly. So wearables. And as I was doing some market research, this early stage startup out of Yale kind of came into the radar. Again, they were quite under the radar, didn't really have much release, but said that they were building a device within stroke detection, which obviously caught my eye. So we actually had her down to the event. She had quite a successful pitch, and there was good feedback from what I remember. But again, they were very early stage. And over the years, so that was probably back in 2016, or it could have been a bit later, 2016, 2017. And since then, they've gained a lot of momentum. They've just actually, in the past few months, they won a startup competition out in LA. Out of, I think there was over 3,000 startups that attended this event, and they were they won the entire event. It was the MedTech Innovator Awards out in LA, which is a big one, Yeah. So what they're building is a wearable for stroke survivors, anywhere from a small TIA to a full-blown hemorrhagic or ischemic stroke, really targeted at secondary prevention. So it's a small device that kind of fits, similar to a Fitbit or Apple Watch, just like we were saying. And they're now trying to really get the momentum, get some funding behind them, and get this into the market, right? Because what they've been able to do, and as we've seen a lot of these successful startups, in digital health do, is focus on the clinical evidence first. So they, and obviously within this space, it's kind of hard to imagine that there wasn't someone in first. And because I think she mentioned along the way, as she was presenting this, so many people are like, well, what do you mean there's no competition? What do you mean no one has done this before? But really, they were able to kind of take the common biomarkers for stroke, and as you see in the media, and as many of our listeners I'm sure know, it's that face drop, arm tension, speech impairment, and kind of start to one by one take those biomarkers and feedback. I think they've started with the arm, arm tension, and be able to kind of measure that as an indicator of a possible stroke. So it's super, super fascinating. I think this device wearable spaces in the digital health market is really going to blow up here in the next few years, as we already seen what Apple could do. And that may or may not be their end play, is to kind of tap their technology into Apple. Sandra didn't give us that juicy stuff, but we could only imagine kind of where they're going with things. So yeah, as David said, I think it's it's a really interesting conversation. We learned a lot about Sandra's upbringing, kind of what got her into Yale. She didn't really imagine she'd be here, but now leading a very innovative company that is in my back door. And I know we said just short down, we can meet in the middle in 95, meet in New Haven one day, see once they've kind of gotten to that next scale. But yeah, it was an exciting interview. So
yeah, and I'll just add to that, Mike, that it was interesting, all the parallels with their startup going through the iCar program. You could tell in this interview, she this is the reason they won all those awards. She knows her stuff. Like, she knew the pain points. She knew, and her magic wand answer is probably one of our top. For me, it's like one of the top three for sure, because it's like, yes, amen. We've been like, yep, we know stroke coordination care is fragmented, disconnected, all those words. And in solving that, I think her product and her technology can be part of that whole package in terms of, empowering the patient, as we talked at the beginning of this intro. So I think we've teed it up pretty nicely. Thank you, Mike. Let's
Absolutely.
let's join the
Let's get in it. And before
going.
that, let's so we're excited, as we mentioned in our previous episode, we're going to have some repeat guests on. So if for the listeners next week, it's going to be a really exciting interview with Carolyn Goggin, who's actually going to be joined by her husband Travis. They have some exciting announcements coming up, really fits into this new year goal setting theme. So again, really looking forward to that one. And this, if you do enjoy this episode, if you enjoy actually listening to us as well, give us a like, give us a subscribe, share with anyone that might be in your network that could enjoy listening to us as well somehow. I don't know how they do it, David. Genuinely.
Well, now that we have a big brain on the team, well, I would have forgot about Caroline to transition for the you're always thinking ahead, Mike, and now that you're empowered with your gigantic, there's some good detail on that brain too. You have to get in.
It's your logo, man. Your artwork. So yeah.
So let's get into it. Without further ado,
Sandra Saldana, CEO and co-founder of Alva Health. Thanks, y'all.
Hi, welcome, Sandra, to the No Stroke podcast. We're super excited to have you on tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I think so. We were chatting before we started the recording that you and I, we've been the LinkedIn connections in that world as you go, but we've been connected probably now for about over 5 years. Kind of goes back to my days with Health Excel and early with you with Alva Health. I think what stuck out to me, I'm a Connecticut native. I saw this super interesting project coming out of Yale. And it's taken some legs now. You've really grown and you've gotten to a pretty interesting place. So we're really looking forward to digging into it today, and really understanding the mission and where you guys are going as a company, and to aid this stroke population that as David and I have interviewed and spoken about, and we're super passionate about looking to aid. It's an underserved population. So first off, congratulations for the amazing work. I'm sure it has been a lot to get to this point. But for our listeners, can you give us a brief recap of who Sandra is, where you grew up, how you've kind of gotten to Connecticut and now made the next move down south? So
yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much for that intro. And I'm super excited to be here today. And I appreciate that you reached out to me on LinkedIn. We've been in touch for a while, and things have changed quite a bit since we started, back in 2017, and it's been a long road to get here, but we think we're getting some good traction, and we're excited to bring this product forward. But I guess just to start off, I was born in Monterrey, Mexico. So I moved to the US when I was 12 years old and grew up in Texas. Middle school, high school down in Houston. And then I went to school up in upstate New York at Cornell. I did some, that's where I got started with doing research and got really deep into sciences and also got interested in business as well. And my family has a bit of a history with business. My dad was a professor at the University of Houston, and I always kind of had this idea I wanted to start a business that was technology science based in some way. So that was it started pretty early on. After my undergrad, I went back to do a PhD in cancer biology at MD Anderson Cancer Center back in Houston. And then after that is when I decided to move into industry. And I moved up to Boston and spent about 4 or 5 years doing B2B sales for a boutique branding agency in the pharmaceutical and med device industry. So that was kind of my first introduction into executives and folks who are building these really exciting technology companies and leading the companies, and it kind of humanized that for me, and exposed me to that process, and that's where I got really excited about starting a business. It kind of gave me that bug, like I should start a business soon. So I decided to go back to school and do more, always starting from the education, right? So learning the didactics of it. I wanted to get a basis for business foundation. So I went to the Yale School of Management for the executive MBA program while I was working. And through that, I met my two co-founders who at the time had just filed IP for our technology back in 2016. They were looking for a business student to help them look through evaluate the commercialization potential of the technology, which is for real-time stroke detection using wearable devices. So it's kind of a long roundabout story. I've been it hasn't been a straight line, but I think all of those experiences kind of coalesce in a nice way and give me a lot of different perspectives to bring into entrepreneurship.
That's great. Thank you. It's always interesting hearing founder stories and where they came from and their path to where they are today. And so you're for our listeners, could you describe what the product, maybe in a few sentences, in the platform that you have around stroke detection?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are using wearable devices. So it's 2 wristbands containing sensors that are, they're worn on both wrists. And then there's a smartphone app and cloud-based monitoring using machine learning and non-machine learning algorithms to detect the onset of hemiparesis, which is one of the hallmarks of stroke onset. So this is one-sided paralysis. That is one of the major symptoms. It doesn't happen to everybody, but we think around 90% of patients have some kind of motor physical disability associated with stroke, and that's where we're starting. And so we look for the onset of this phenomenon and then immediately notify the user. If they don't respond within 2 minutes, we escalate the call to a trained medical responder who can call 911 and then notify the user's emergency contacts so that the patient can receive medical attention immediately, get to the hospital within the time windows in which they qualify to and can benefit from the available proven therapies, whether that's TPA, the clot buster that can dissolve the ischemic strokes, or mechanical thrombectomy, which is an approach that works for about 12% of patients. So that's our goal. We're using a wearable, it's lightweight, water resistant, comfortable to wear around the clock. And initially, the product will be applied to a specific population of patients who are thought to be in imminent risk of a stroke. So initially, that'll be TIA patients as well as stroke survivors.
Thank you. Are there particular conditions, maybe the higher risk, like patients maybe that are detected to have AFib that would be maybe a candidate for monitoring using your technology?
Yeah, so there's actually 1 in 4 people over the age of 25 have a risk factor for stroke, which is unbeknownst to many people, and that's due to conditions like hypertension, type 2 diabetes, atrial fibrillation, and obesity, smoking, a lot of conditions. Some people are undergoing procedures in the hospital that place them at high risk of stroke. Any catheter-based procedures, that can place someone at high risk of a stroke. And so there really is a huge number of people out there who have some kind of determinant that places them at higher risk. And our hope is to, prove the concept in these imminent risk patients in this acute population, but then expand our service out to a broader group of people that consists of folks who haven't had a stroke yet, who haven't had disability, but they're no, they're at risk as well.
It's really fascinating. And bring us back to your time when you were in school, still finishing your MBA, and these two co-students of yours walked up and said, "Hey, Sandra, I have an idea." What kind of, where was that at in 2017 to kind of where you are today? Like, bring us on that product journey.
Yeah, no, sure. So my co-founders, to clarify, they are both faculty at the time, and still they're on the faculty at the Yale School of Medicine. So I met them through the Entrepreneurial network at Yale. So I was originally looking at a different technology. I went into school with this goal of, finding a technology that was exciting and, had a high promise of commercial impact and patient impact. And so I was working on another diagnostic at the time, but through that network, I was connected to them. And so, we started informally meeting, trying to understand what the technology is, what's the vision for the product, and what does the market look like? Is this a problem that affects a lot of people? What's the clinical need? Can we create IP? Is the IP protectable? And it, could we get this patent granted? And we now, this year, after all those years, we finally got our core patent granted in 2021. So that was something that we looked at the time. And in 2017, we were accepted into the Yale Entrepreneurial Institute Summer Fellowship, which is how we started. Officially, we created a company, we participated in that accelerator program. So that was our first formal, business incubator type activity that we did. And that's really where it started. We, the first couple of years were mostly spent on the product side, at least, doing clinical research. We had a lot of questions around, can we actually use wearable sensors to get a signal? Could we create algorithms that can classify wearables data into, normal versus stroke, and so we started with off-the-shelf, devices. We looked at a lot of different types. So we spent a lot of the time doing clinical research. We also participated in another program that was really, I would say, foundational, which was NSF I-Corps. So that's the National Science Foundation has this program called I-Corps that kind of gets you out of the building, go out and interview stakeholders to understand the landscape and try to understand, where exactly your product fits in the stroke patient's journey, or like who's going to be your customer. And I think that's really, I can't speak highly enough about that program, because it really was eye-opening in terms of helping us determine like who actually benefits from this product. So we worked on the clinical side and the commercial side. And then in 2019, that's when we finally, received some financial support to build this product. So that was in summer of 2019. We received 2 phase 1 SBIR grants. One of them was from National Science Foundation and the National Institutes of Health. That was the second grant. And so with that funding, we built our initial prototype. We had done enough work clinically where we felt confident, okay, we can actually build algorithms that can detect, that can, classify the data and be able to make that call, whether it's stroke or not. And so we decided to build our own form factor at that point, because what we found is that the off-the-shelf solutions that were out there, the other wearables, whether they're research only or commercially available, just don't have that capability to monitor patients long-term. And that some of them are, they're either have too many sensors or not enough sensors, or they're not comfortable for around the clock, or they're not stable enough to collect the data that you need, and they're not really like amenable for long-term monitoring. So that's where we decided, let's build our own, and so that's what we've done over the last couple of years. Done a lot of work around hardware and then firmware as well. And now, this year we've had quite a bit of success in terms of traction with competitions, pitch competitions. We've won the Longevity Innovation Summit, business plan competition. In the aging in place community, there's a lot of interest in what we're building. We also went through MedTech Innovator, which is the largest accelerator for MedTech companies in the world. There were 1,100 applicants in that program, and we ended up coming out with the grand prize of $350,000. So that was really exciting. We also participated in Techstars Los Angeles and Plug and Play Ventures, Health Tech, and Mass Medic, Ignite up in Boston. So we've done a ton of programs this year, and the reason is that we're now kind of accelerating. We're moving towards the next phase, and that's going to involve us doing our clinical validation study, building the next phase of our product, and then going to talk to the FDA. So we've gotten a lot of great advisors on board, and a lot of mentors who are helping us kind of think through these next steps and helping us craft the path forward.
You've certainly been busy, and then and you're kind of going back to your early discovery when you were like you mentioned the value of the iCourse program and getting out of the building and talking. When you were interviewing your patient population, did you get feedback around how patients would feel about wearing devices? Because if you're going to pick up, detect 24 hours a day, that's going to be kind of on 24/7, right? And I guess more specifically, a question around, there's a certain subset of stroke that happens, they call wake up stroke, that is, ischemic usually in nature, but is like it describes, first out of bed, waking up.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes patient will describe that's a time what they don't, sometimes if the symptoms are subtle, they just think they're groggy, they think they're, they dismiss it, and that's the category I fell under and kind of what I did. Are patients, were they receptive to wearing something in bed and throughout the day to get that peace of mind, I guess, of having the support that would detect?
Yeah, I mean that's one of the main questions we get from patients and from caregivers. It's like, is your product going to work at night? Because that's one of the times that people are scared of. When that can happen, and you have no idea, you're sleeping. So and that's something that we can detect it at night. So that's one of the things that we want to make sure that we provide as part of this service, because stroke can happen at any time of the day. Wake up strokes account for about 14% of stroke patients, and we did observe a stroke in our study that happened at night. We actually had a patient who came in and was treated with mechanical thrombectomy, and she was recovering from that procedure and then had another stroke during that night, and was discovered the next morning at 7 a.m. unconscious. When we went back and looked at the wearables data, we found some anomalies happening around 11 p.m. Our algorithm would have made a call around 1:30 in the morning and alerted the patient at that time. But unfortunately, this happens. Like you were saying, it's common, and that's something that people are concerned about. But ultimately, what we found from the patients, from those conversations with stroke survivors and their caregivers, is that patients are not as worried about the, the device itself. They of course want it to be lightweight and comfortable, and they don't want it to look like, a medical device. They don't want to look sick. They don't want to look like, something's wrong. But they're, people want this. People want that peace of mind. I've heard stories from, patients who, one guy told me that after his stroke, his wife is, pretty much on high alert around the clock. So, if he's, giving a lecture or, doing something, if he's busy, if he doesn't pick up the phone, she starts to get very worried. And at nighttime, you can't get up in the middle of the night. And then, everybody wakes up because everybody's worried something's wrong. So it's something that people definitely are worried about. And they kind of, once you've had a stroke, you've seen what could happen and you have that top of mind. So I think that peace of mind is something that people really look for. So that's what we think our product can offer patients.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
And, it's that, those interviews have to be so valuable to you, as you're continuing to iterate on the product. I was curious, you see a lot of these wearables coming in. Most are wrist worn, correct? Some are worn higher up on the arm. Some are, develop, like there's different ways that, these wearables can detect. First off, like where on the body would be your wearable be placed? And then secondly, when we're looking at biomarkers, like what are the top things that you're looking for and that you're detecting? Yeah.
Sure. So the wristbands are, the wristbands. So they're worn on the around the wrists. It doesn't have to be right on the same spot. Like it can move around. It can be kind of loose around the wrist. But that's kind of how we see it. Part of it is due to that, that functionality and that ability to embed into people's lives as they currently live. So we don't want it to look like a medical device and like something that's, kind of medical necessarily. So what we envision is something that looks like a Livestrong bracelet around the outside. So very discreet, very lightweight, and it's worn around the wrist where people are used to wearing things, and so it's not disruptive from that perspective. And what we're looking for is, as I mentioned, so hemiparesis, which essentially involves disability that is one-sided. So we're looking for, movement signatures. We're looking at asymmetrical disability. We're looking at, the disability that happens on one side of the body, essentially. So it's movement, and we're looking at not just the asymmetry, but also a personalized signature. So the second half of our analysis is personalized from the standpoint that we create a personalized movement signature for each individual. And there are patterns that kind of repeat over time. There's a 24-hour cycle, there's a 7-day cycle, there's a 30-day cycle, and the algorithm learns from that individual's patterns, and it can detect when there are deviations from the norm and take that into account. And if it notices that something is anomalous, that this patient typically doesn't behave in this way, then we can take that into account and make our algorithm even more specific. So that's how it works. We're looking at movement signatures. In the future, we'd like to embed other things like speech and facial recognition. But initially we're just focusing on that physical disability.
Interesting. You mentioned, Sandra, that your technology gives the family member, caregiver peace of mind, so they maybe can reduce the number of check-ins or just have the ability to kind of give that person a little bit more independence. Have you observed or noticed on the other side for the user that it also maybe makes them feel like they can increase their mobility? Does it reduce their fear? Have you if you're with you mentioning you'll be able to track certain metrics, are users actually more active because they are now being monitored? Because I'm just curious, as a, from a physical therapy standpoint, that's one of the things when I'm working with Survivor, they're almost fearful that there could do something wrong by being more active.
Well, that's a great question. And I think we haven't studied that yet, but we have a study coming up next year in which we'll be taking a look at things like that. So we'll be deploying our devices in a high-risk population. We're going to be observing strokes happening in people's homes, and so these are all going to be patients who've already had a stroke, and they've kind of gone through this process, and now they're at risk. So it'll be interesting to see if we see, if we notice that there are, feedback from the patients is something we plan to, to get input from the patients. How did you feel wearing this device? Did you feel more comfortable, more confident? Did you have, on a scale from 1 to 10, like how worried are you about, the side effects of a potential additional stroke recurrence, things of that nature. Those are all things that we want to test in this study, in addition to, to the algorithm side of things, the user experience.
Yeah, it'd be very interesting to observe that empowerment or engagement component to it, in addition to the risk reduction and the obvious, the line of defense you provide. So interesting.
Yeah. I was curious, you also mentioned in that initial phase with iCorps, and you went out into the real world and you were interviewing both patients but also potential customers. What did that customer group look like? I mean, what are you guys targeting? Would this be a direct to consumer where a stroke survivor would actually need to purchase this device, or would it be something that in the ideal world would be reimbursed?
Yeah, so that's one of the questions that we asked during iCore. Is this something that customers would be willing to buy? And we did get a really positive feedback from the patients themselves and their caregivers. The caregivers is what we found. They're very motivated because they're the ones that are being affected ultimately, providing care. Some of them are dropping out of the workforce to take care of their loved ones. And so we did receive a lot of, opinions and thoughts around that. People really would be willing to pay for this out of pocket. But there's also kind of a limit to how much people can afford. And there, not every patient segment is able to afford something like this out of pocket. A lot of people struggle with access to health insurance, or not health insurance, sorry, but access to healthcare. And so it's not necessarily that that we could address as many people by making it direct to consumer. And so we also spoke with a lot of insurance companies and folks in the payment reimbursement space who believe that this product could be traditionally reimbursed by insurance companies. There is a specific, there is a value already associated with early detection. There are proven therapies in stroke. It's a very unique space because it's not just monitoring for the sake of monitoring, but it's monitoring to connect patients to a therapy that's already proven to be effective. There's a lot of data around the better patient outcomes, better lower cost of care, shorter hospital stays, shorter length of rehab when patients get to the hospital quickly and receive treatment. So that part of the equation has already been well established. TPA has been around for almost 25 years, and it's still underutilized despite its efficacy. So that's where we found, the biggest value proposition was in increasing the utilization of these therapies that are proven to be effective, and then providing, passing on that cost savings to the insurance companies. And in turn, we will be affecting as many people as we can. And we think that that's the most scalable way. and the best way to get to as many people as possible.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And and as you were talking, I was only thinking about a product that is it's called a live core. They have a cardiogram and for EKG detection, and it's available in store. You can get it for like $69 over the counter, pairs with an app, and again, it's that peace of mind, and it tracks your AFib and kind of gives you that extra level of protection. So I think the challenge for you guys is going to be, all right, what's that price match? Like, how do we create a device that's able to track these symptoms and give that peace of mind at a price level that can be direct to consumer? Because I think you're right, like that ultimate impact is going to be in that D2C, but blended in with some support on a reimbursement angle. But I think it's funny, David and I, we've had many chats, and we just had actually David's neurologist and a close friend of ours now from Tufts Medical Center, who's a head neurologist, kind of leading a lot of stuff in this acute phase and secondary prevention. And I asked him a similar question. It's like, all right, if we're doing anything in this space, right, all around kind of getting that patient back to where that life that they came in prior to a stroke, does any of that matter if that reimbursement isn't there? So it's great to hear that, in that research and in those conversations with insurers that, they saw this as a potential reimbursement model, because you're right, there's that treatment there. And if you could get them there quicker and eliminate costs on the other end of not catching it, it's a good model for them.
Absolutely. And we're lucky. I mean, not lucky, but, there are very straightforward ways to measure that efficacy and to measure that cost savings. And it's all been well established. So it's just a matter of doing the work and getting that data and demonstrating to payers that this is worthwhile. And I think most of them would agree that this is a kind of a no-brainer. It's everybody wins.
Do you have any competition in your space right now with your device?
So there are a few folks working on different approaches to stroke detection in real time. When we started, there was nobody. So we got that question a lot. Why hasn't anybody done this before? And why are you the only ones doing this? And so it was really challenging at first because it seemed almost like too good to be true. If you could just use wearables for stroke detection, somebody would have come up with it by now. But now, we're fortunate that there are others now who have taken interest in this problem. So it's there's different approaches out there. And I think what differentiates us from others who are working on this issue is that our solution is being developed specifically to serve that at home continuous remote monitoring, around the clock during that high risk window. So our solution is unique because it works around the clock. We're not asking patients to fumble around with rechargeable batteries and having to replace replace batteries or replace devices frequently. Our goal is to create a seamless solution that is lightweight and very friendly for the user, requires no medical training to operate. So essentially, we're targeting for the battery life to last an entire 90 days, which is the monitoring window. We're making the form factor as attractive as possible and as comfortable as possible for patients. And we're really, taking that user-centered approach, designing with the patient and the caregiver in mind, and making this a product that's really embeds into people's lives as they live. So it's not something that's complicated and needs medical training or specialized knowledge to operate. So I think that's what makes us different. We're really taking that approach of the patient comes first, and I think we're pretty we have a good lead on others who are also addressing this issue, and we're pretty excited about our prospects.
apparently all the accelerators are as well. I mean, you're quite accomplished. So, well done. So you spoke briefly to some of the clinical trials that you'll be looking at soon. And, before you get on the CVS and Walgreens shelves for survivors to be able to use, is there a way that a survivor today listening to the show could contact or be involved in any of these upcoming clinical trials?
Yes, absolutely. So they can contact, we don't have a dedicated part of our website for the upcoming study yet, but that will be coming up soon. So in the beginning of next year, we'll have a page, with some information on how to sign up for our study. So we're going to be launching a study in the middle of next year. And we'll be looking for stroke survivors, in this particular study, TIAs and stroke survivor specifically. But we're also always looking for healthy volunteers and people who, who just want to volunteer in the non-stroke arm of the study, which is, it's ongoing. Currently, we work through Yale University, so that's where we do all of our patient recruitment, but we can do it over the internet as well, through our team there, and we'll be bringing some of those capabilities in-house as well soon. So they can contact us, through our website. There's a contact, how to contact us page. They can, send me a LinkedIn message or I'm also on Twitter. I don't know if there's a way for you to share that information, maybe in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll absolutely put all that information, and we'd look forward to helping you recruit for your, going into next year. So absolutely. Do you have one question kind of along those lines too? Do you see as you grow, continue to have an engagement, like a patient advisory, or a way to keep that patient perspective in mind? You talked early on how that was important, and as you evolve and maybe add new components to your product line, do you see the patients being able to maybe take a role there as well on maybe an advisory level?
Yes, absolutely. We're always looking for for patient engagement. We have some folks in our network informally who kind of we bounce ideas back and forth with. But we're always looking for advisory from the end the end users and their family members as well. So happy to welcome that kind of engagement and have more conversations of that nature.
Great. Well, we're at the point where Mike likes to wield his magic wand. So go ahead, Mike.
All right. So last question that everyone on our podcast gets is, if we were to hand you a magic wand, how would you redesign the stroke care pathway?
So that's a great question. And I think going back to the NSF I-Corps, where we had an opportunity to really look at the landscape and all of the different stakeholders along the stroke patient's journey. And what really struck me was how fragmented it is currently, how each part of the stroke patient's journey is kind of in its own world, and there's not a lot of connection. It's not very streamlined. How the patient goes from the home to the ambulance to the hospital, going through treatment and then back through rehab and back home. There's not a lot of continuity of care. Once a patient is diagnosed with a stroke, a lot of the times they lose touch with the neurologist who treated them. They lose track of, hospitals lose track of these patients, and there's no continuity in most cases. So if I could wield a magic wand, I would centralize the care for people at high risk of stroke, in a way that all of the services are kind of contained in one place, and you have a team of people that's like assigned to each individual patient, and that you have all the experts who are taking a look at that individual, at that person as an individual, not just another stroke patient, but they're looking at their lifestyle, they're looking at their, their medications, they're looking at their specific rehab journey, their specific risk for recurrent stroke, and tailoring care for that individual. So this is a similar concept to what is done currently in cancer, where I did my PhD in cancer biology at MD Anderson, and at the time when I was there was this talk. A lot of the focus was on personalized medicine, right? So there's all of these personalized therapies that are personalized to that patient's tumor type, where each breast cancer patient is could be completely different from the next breast cancer patient. So what they did there was put together a subset of experts who looked at the tumor from all angles, from the immunology side, from the basic biology side, and kind of tried to come up with a plan for each individual's care. So something similar, but for stroke patients, because each patient is different, and each patient has different risk factors and different ways in which you could prevent a recurrence of stroke. So that's what I would do.
I think I might say, David, that was just one of top three answers we've heard. I would say
spot on. And we all need to charge our magic wands, because we're on that same mission. So really well done. I mean, I couldn't think of a better way to close out the show, because that's kind of why we're here, reaching out to individuals like yourself and companies and stroke survivors to share their stories, but also to let folks know that there is a solution. We're just in a lot of pieces right now. And it's, we have to work hard to make that not be the norm, and maybe the exception in rare cases. But unfortunately, right now, it is still the norm in stroke care.
Well, you're certainly doing your part, Sandra, and the rest of the team at Alva Health. We wish you the best of luck. It's been an amazing journey so far, and we could only hope the 2030 vision comes to life for you. So it'll be a fun one, and I would love to, if you do have time, if you're ever back up in the New Haven area and want to grab a coffee, chat, I would love to sit down and actually meet you face to face and really learn more. So
yeah, I'd love to do that. I'll be there in early next year, 2022. So I'll definitely look you up.
Awesome.
We'll get together.
Cool. Thank you, Sandra.
All right, Sandra, it's been brilliant. Enjoy the rest of your evening and the warm Dallas weather.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.